With my bag only partially zipped, I sensed his approaching footsteps, purposeful and heavy. Before I could even pivot around, his voice cut through the silence of the room, cold and commanding. "Where do you think you're going?" Mark's piercing tone sent a shiver down my spine, my heart racing in my chest. Slowly, I pivoted, clutching the strap of my duffel bag tightly as if it could shield me from his piercing gaze. His eyes bore into mine with a primal intensity, his fist ominously rising without a word spoken, as memories of vulnerability and fear from the past flooded back. But just as his fist hovered above, a moment of hesitation filled the air. His gaze shifted towards the bathroom behind me, a glint of confusion and then panic extinguishing the coldness in his eyes. Following his line of sight, my world came to a standstill. However, before I reveal who emerged from that bathroom, we need to rewind to a different morning in another kitchen, a time when everything seemed whole. The memories flood back, the sweet scent of cinnamon and vanilla lingering in the air, the comforting sound of my mother's gentle humming echoing in the background. Lullaby played softly, the sunlight filtering through the gauzy curtains as I sat, still small enough to be cross-legged in the kitchen chair at the age of 7. "Julia," she whispered gently, brushing a stray hair from her cheek with the back of her hand. There were 2 plates, 2 mugs, and a small bouquet of wildflowers in a mason jar placed between us. "Why are you all dressed up?" I inquired curiously. She was adorned in her finest blue dress, her lipstick a soft pink, her hair neatly braided. With a smile, she replied, "Because every day with you is a special occasion. I want you to always remember that, okay?" Little did I know it would be our final goodbye. Later that day, we strolled hand in hand to the park, our grip tighter than usual. As we fed the ducks by the pond, a heaviness lingered in the air. When we sat on a bench, she turned to me and softly asked, "Do you know how much I love you?" "A lot," I replied, "and I love you even more." Planting a kiss on my forehead, she whispered, "Remember, no matter what happens, Mama will always be right here with you." With a gentle touch to my heart, tears began to fill our eyes. I inquired about her tear-filled eyes. "Are you crying?" I asked. "No, dear, just the wind," she replied. That evening, she read me a story about a princess finding a way back home. I drifted off to sleep listening to her gentle, unwavering voice. When I awoke the next morning, she was no longer there. They explained it was her heart. I couldn't comprehend how a heart could suddenly cease to beat. Don't hearts continue to beat forever? I persistently questioned everyone, "Where's Mama?" They explained she was unwell, but avoided meeting my gaze. I held on to the hope that she would return. People get sick and then recover, right? Mama would surely come back. However, a week later, unfamiliar faces appeared. A woman in a grey suit packed my belongings and mentioned I was going to a better place with other children. As I screamed and clung to the doorway, insisting on seeing Mama, the woman looked me straight in the eyes and declared, "Your mother is deceased. It's time for you to mature." That was the instant I grasped that growing up meant facing solitude. The state facility was stark and impersonal, with lengthy corridors that reeked of bleach and inexpensive furnishings, cafeteria food, metal bunk beds painted in institutional green. Mrs. Adler, a stern woman, mentioned that your bunk is by the window. "Bedding will be changed on Wednesdays," she informed. When she gave the instructions, I stayed silent and only nodded, holding on tightly to the one possession I was allowed to keep, a photo of Mama in a wooden frame. Hearing me, Leah, the girl in the neighbouring bed, warned me to hide it, as everything tends to get stolen in this place. With a sigh, she, a 9-year-old who knew all the rules, asked if I had any family. Uncertainly, I replied that I didn't know. She expressed concern, saying that it's not good for kids without a family as they don't get taken by anyone. I was caught off guard, unaware that being taken was even an option. The routine became monotonous, waking up, eating, going to school, napping, having dinner, and then lights out. I learned not to shed tears, to ration my candy into 8 pieces to make it last a week. I consoled myself with the belief that Mama was in a hospital somewhere recovering, and that she would come for me. That lie was my only solace, allowing me to finally fall asleep. However, 6 months later, everything changed when he arrived. A tall man in a grey suit, similar to those seen in courtroom dramas, he was treated like royalty by the director Julia Spencer, someone called. No one used my full name. It startled me. In the office, he looked at me for a long time. Same grey eyes as mine, same stubborn chin. "Hi, Julia," he said gently, "I'm your father." I stared at him. How? How do you know? He took a deep breath. "After your mother passed, one of her friends contacted me. She said, 'Your name was mentioned in the obituary.' I took a DNA test. The results came last week, and I signed guardianship papers this morning." My world tilted. My father then, where had he been? Why hadn't he come for me? Why wasn't he there when Mama died? My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Where were you?" He dropped his gaze. "I didn't know you existed." I stared at him. "She didn't tell me. I wish she had." It was the first lie he ever told me, and it wouldn't be the last. He said he didn't know that if he had, he would have come, would have fought, would have done anything. But I didn't believe him. Not then. Not when the ache of 6 months without Richard Spencer, now residing in Charleston with his wife Susan, shared with me that the memory of his mother still resided within him. His wife eagerly anticipated meeting me. I couldn't help but wonder about Mama. The hope lingered within me that she would return, even after death. Richard knelt down to reassure me. He gently explained that my mother would not be returning. The finality of his words shattered my belief. Although I had heard the word dead before, his direct acknowledgement of it caused something to break inside me. With a heavy heart, he brought me to their spacious home in Charleston. The house was welcoming, spacious, and immaculate, with echoing hardwood floors and hallways scented with fresh linen and lemon polish. I tried to embrace this new environment. When we arrived, Susan welcomed me. In her early 40s, she had warm brown eyes and a gentle demeanour, instantly giving the impression of someone who never raised her voice. "You must be Julia," she said warmly. Her smile was serene and deliberate as she extended her hand towards me. "I've been waiting to meet you," she said. I hesitantly shook her hand back, feeling stiff and unsure. The house carried the comforting aroma of cookies, resembling my mother's home, but not quite the same. "Richard, can you show Julia her room?" she asked. The room assigned to me was extensive, larger than the entire apartment we used to live in. It was adorned with soft floral curtains, a new bed, a desk, and toys. However, it lacked the familiar creaking floorboard by the door, the chipped picture frames, and the lingering scent of my mother's hand cream. "If you don't like anything, we can change it," Susan said kindly. "This is your home now." "Thank you," I replied, although I didn't truly believe it. The initial months felt like observing someone else's life from inside a glass jar. I ate at a spacious table, slept on crisp sheets, and attended a new school. Susan would pack my lunch with little notes of encouragement like, "You've got this." Yet, my heart remained unconvinced. Richard, while polite and kind, always seemed distant. He would inquire about school in the manner of a teacher. Do you need assistance? He bestowed birthday presents and drove me to piano lessons. However, he omitted to read bedtime stories or tousle my hair. One evening, Susan entered my room while I lay awake gazing at the ceiling. "He's making an effort," she murmured gently. "It's challenging for him." "Why?" I inquired. "Because he missed out on everything and he's aware of it." I remained silent, pondering why he wasn't cherishing the present moments more if he was cognizant of what he had lost. As the years went by, my inquiries dwindled. I assimilated into the family, grinning for photos and addressing him as Dad without wincing. I dressed elegantly, excelled academically, and endeavoured to be a model daughter. Upon turning 18, while tidying up one of Susan's storage spaces, I stumbled upon a revelation. A collection of letters bound by a ribbon, bearing my mother's unmistakable penmanship. My heart raced as I unfolded the first letter. "Richard, please do not search for us. Julia believes she doesn't have a father. Let's leave it as is. You made your decision. I'm making mine." But if anything were to happen to me, please take care of our daughter. She should not suffer for our mistakes. The letters were dated, with one sent just a month before our mother passed away. She had tried to reach out. He had been aware. As I read them repeatedly, the words felt like sharp needles. So he did have knowledge. She did confide in him, and yet he chose to stay away. When Susan discovered me in tears, I did not hide the letters. Instead, I looked directly into her eyes and asked, "Why didn't you inform me?" "Because your mother requested us not to," she replied softly, "and because some truths are too heavy for a child." "But I am no longer a child," I insisted. "No, Julia," she whispered, "you are not. And now it's up to you to decide what to do with this truth." That evening, I sat on my bed, gazing at the dark Charleston sky. Somewhere out there, other girls lived simpler lives with parents who genuinely loved each other, in homes built on truth. Mine was a narrative of love, unable to withstand pride. A mother who favored silence, a father seeking comfort, and a girl carrying the burden alone. The University of Virginia's library featured tall windows and an old wooden staircase that creaked, almost as if it were sharing secrets. I spent a great deal of my free time there, tucked away among the shelves, behind a fortress of books that I had carefully arranged around me. While other students chatted about parties, road trips, and internships, all I craved was tranquility. I consistently occupied the same table in the far left corner next to the frosted glass window, finding solace in the solitude, up until he arrived. One October afternoon, a voice interrupted my solitary sanctuary, asking if he could share the table as all other spots were taken. Startled, I lifted my gaze to find a tall figure with dark hair and gentle eyes, arms laden with medical textbooks. "Sure, go ahead," I replied, sliding my own books to create some space. He settled in and began perusing a thick tome on human anatomy, his focus unwavering. I tried not to stare, but there was something about his quiet diligence that made me feel at ease. 30 minutes later, he looked up and introduced himself as Ethan. "Julia," I responded, feeling a spark of connection in the serenity of our library haven. He glanced at the stack of books in front of me. "Early childhood education," I confirmed with a nod. "Planning to teach?" he asked. I hesitated before replying, "Maybe. Kids are easier than adults. They don't pretend to care. They either do or they don't." He smiled in a way that made me feel understood. "I'm studying to be a surgeon," he shared, laughing, "not because I like blood, but because I like fixing what's broken." His words lingered in my mind. In the following weeks, we often found ourselves at the same table at the same time. We didn't talk much, but simply shared the space, notes, and occasionally snacks. The silence between us felt comforting, not lonely. One day, as I was taking notes, he softly commented, "You have beautiful hands." Confused, I asked, "What?" He repeated, "Your hands. They're steady, precise, like a healer's." I awkwardly laughed it off, stating that I wasn't a healer. But he insisted, "You are. You just don't know it yet." By November, we strolled through the park together, the leaves crunching under our shoes and the wind kissing our cheeks. For the first time, I allowed someone to come close to me. Sitting together on a bench by the water, he inquired, "What's your family like?" I felt a wave of tension wash over me. "I live with my dad and his wife. They're good people." He then asked about my mum. "She passed away when I was 7, I replied. "I'm sorry," he murmured. I found solace in his empathy. "It's okay." I hardly remember her face, but her voice lingers in my memory. After a brief pause, I shared, "I spent some time in a foster home before my dad found me." He didn't push for more information, choosing instead to let me navigate the silence. "I don't usually talk about this," I confessed. "You don't have to," he reassured me. "But when you're ready, I'm here to listen." I realized then how much I needed someone who didn't demand parts of me, someone who simply waited. As winter drifted by like a soft prayer, Ethan accompanied me home from the library each evening. He would buy me tea from the vending machine, assist me with my projects, and remember when I had tests. While we never labeled it as love, A genuine connection was quietly blossoming between us. On a quiet February night with snowflakes descending outside and the world enveloped in silence, I found myself confiding in him. My mother passed away alone, and I spent years holding on to the hope that she would return. Each time I caught a whiff of a similar perfume or passed by a bakery, a surge of longing would wash over me. But he, without saying a word, simply enveloped me in his arms, not possessively or greedily, but with unwavering support. "Thank you," I whispered gratefully. "For what?" he inquired. "For not offering cliches like everything happens for a reason." "Time doesn't heal everything," he softly responded. "Sometimes it merely teaches us to coexist with the pain." In that instant, I realized he truly saw me, not just as the studious daughter or the compliant student, but as me. And in that moment, I began to believe that I was worthy of love. He was the antithesis of Ethan, self-assured, accomplished, and intellectually captivating. His name was Mark Caldwell, one of the youngest adjunct lecturers at the School of Education. He took notice of me after a presentation, praising my composure, clarity, and charisma. Mark saw potential in me, claiming that I only needed guidance to flourish. Initially hesitant, it was flattering. His attention felt like validation, like finally someone who knew the world saw me and thought I belonged in it. He took me to expensive restaurants, introduced me to his colleagues, called me exceptional and rare. When Ethan wrote to me about the opportunity in Europe, 3 years prestigious clinics, once in a lifetime experience, I froze. He asked me to come with him, to marry him. "I want a life with you," he said. "We can build it together," but I was afraid. Afraid of leaving everything behind. Afraid of choosing the unknown. "I need time," I told him. He gave me space. Weeks, then months. And in that space, Mark filled the silence. He made me feel important, not soft, not damaged, important. The wedding was exactly what people imagined success looked like. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, imported champagne, guests in tailored suits, murmuring how lucky Mark was. Even Susan seemed overwhelmed by it all. In the dressing room before the ceremony, she touched my veil. "Are you happy?" asked gently. I smiled at her through the mirror. "Mark is a good man. I didn't ask about Mark," she said softly. "I asked about you." I didn't know how to answer that. During our honeymoon, Mark was generous, thoughtful, polished. He talked about buying a condo in a trendy district, about saving for investment properties, about building a future that made sense. Then one night, I asked, half joking, "What would you think if we had a baby sooner than planned?" He set down his wine glass. "Why rush into chaos when we're finally on track?" "Chaos?" I laughed. "That's what you call a baby." He reached across the table, covered my hand with his, smiled tightly. "Julia, I'm just being practical. I love you, but there's a right time for everything." That was the first time I felt something cold coil around my heart. Still, I nodded. I agreed because that's what good wives do. I started teaching at a local elementary school. Mark advanced in his department. Every photo of us looked PE. His arm securely around my waist, I maintained a practiced smile ingrained into my muscle memory. However, beneath the facade of perfection, subtle signs of control emerged. I was gently directed on what to wear to the upcoming dinner party and cautioned about discussing my upbringing in detail to avoid making others uneasy. While I convinced myself that he had good intentions and was merely preserving our public image, a sense of unease lingered as I tried to blend in beside a man of his stature. The news of my unexpected pregnancy brought a mix of fear and excitement. As I purchased a tiny yellow onesie and hid it away, anticipating the joy of revealing it to him, his reaction upon learning the news was far from what I had hoped for. His face hardened, his words cutting through my hopeful anticipation. "What were you thinking?" he snapped, emphasizing that I was not prepared for this responsibility. Overwhelmed with emotions, I struggled to articulate my feelings as tears welled up in my eyes. Despite the instinct to flee, I found myself whispering instead. "I'm sorry," he said, "but it was too late for apologies. You'll have it, but next time, seek permission first. That was the moment I realized the man I had married didn't love me but loved control instead, and I had just handed him the means to tighten his grasp. Her name was Emily, and she arrived in early spring, swaddled in the softest pink hospital blanket. She had my eyes and a tenderness about her that tugged at my heartstrings. For the first time in years, a sense of peace and even joy washed over me. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, Mark would soften too. But he didn't. He arrived late at the hospital, observing her from a distance through the nursery window, his hands casually tucked in his pockets as if evaluating an investment. "She looks fine," he remarked before planting a perfunctory kiss on my forehead and departing. Back at home, he became meticulous. Each hour of sleep, every feeding, every cry became a disruption, a flaw, a failing on my part. "Why is she crying again?" he would snap. "She's just a baby, Mark. Other mothers get their babies to sleep. Why can't you?" I softly sang lullabies that I struggled to recall from my own childhood, tears streaming down my face as I comforted my child with whispered reassurances. "It's all right. Mama's here," I repeated, though the weight of uncertainty lingered in my words. Mark had not yet resorted to physical violence, but his hurtful remarks left invisible bruises. "You've let yourself go. You used to take pride in your appearance. Don't turn into one of those women who blame the baby for their laziness." I avoided looking at my reflection and stopped bothering with makeup, feeling like a stranger to myself. Despite this, I greeted him with a smile and attempted to show affection when he returned home, hoping to rekindle the love with each interaction. When I discovered I was pregnant with Ben a year later, I kept the news to myself for 3 weeks. I was afraid, not of his anger escalating to physical abuse at that moment, but of the disdain I could already sense beneath his composed facade. Again, he remarked when I finally revealed my pregnancy, his tone disapproving. "Are you incapable of keeping track of your own body?" Whispering, "He's your son too." I felt compelled to convey that no child of ours should be brought into a chaotic environment. I found myself apologizing incessantly for feeling fatigued, for needing to buy groceries, for the children's tears. "Sorry," I would mutter reflexively, only to be met with his response, "Don't apologize. Be grateful that I'm still here." Yet, his words soon ceased to suffice. The initial physical aggression transpired when I accidentally spilled water on the kitchen floor. As I slipped, managing to steady myself, he barged in, observed the mess, and grasped my arm forcefully, resulting in visible bruises. "Clean it up. You're not a child," he snarled. "I'm sorry," I uttered. Suddenly, he pivoted and pushed me against the countertop, causing my elbow to collide harshly with its edge. "That's the issue. You're always apologizing. Strive to be better." Despite the troubling occurrences, I couldn't bring myself to depart. I convinced myself that it was simply stress, and that circumstances would ultimately improve. Following the birth of Lily, our third child, in the delivery room, I remained emotionally detached, accustomed to concealing my feelings as if they were contraband. Mark failed to show up, citing a purported meeting. When the nurse inquired, "Is Dad on his way?" "He's busy," I answered. The glance she gave me spoke volumes. Life at home turned into a battlefield. Mark refused to lend a hand with the kids. "You wanted them," he contended. "You raised them." My oldest, Emily, began to flinch at the sound of the front door opening. Ben would hide under the table at the mere echo of Mark's footsteps in the hallway. Lily, too young to comprehend, would burst into tears. As for me, I became a mere shadow, a husk, drifting through the house like a piece of furniture. Then one night, Emily crept into my bed, wrapped her tiny arms around my waist, and softly whispered, "Mummy, I don't like it when Daddy's home." At that moment, something within me fractured once more. But unlike before, this time it did not shatter me, it awakened me. Because if my daughter was starting to feel fear, that meant she was beginning to be like me. It all began with a lie, a simple one. I fibbed to Mark, telling him that I was taking the kids to the park. Instead, I drove to my stepmother's house. Susan had always been my refuge, someone I could confide in. But when you live in fear, after a while, even kindness can begin to seem perilous. We sat on the porch as the children frolicked in the yard, the air redolent with the fragrant scent of roses and summer rain. With a warm smile, she poured me a cup of tea and observed, "You appear weary, my dear." Peering into the swirling steam, I mustered the courage to ask, "Susan, may I pose a question?" She nodded encouragingly. "Do you believe that sometimes two individuals are simply not suited for each other?" Her gaze sharpened as she met my eyes. "Is something amiss with you and Mark?" I faltered, skirting around the truth with my words. "He can be very particular, and I often fall short of his expectations." Setting down her teacup, she fixed me with a knowing look. "Julia, is he causing you harm?" I hurriedly denied it. "No, nothing like that. He's just critical. He didn't want children so soon, and he believes I've let myself go, that I disappoint him." Unwavering, she delivered her wisdom. "Darling, becoming a mother is not a misstep, but a marvel, something no one else can dictate. It's not a failure, it's a miracle." I studied her then, truly seeing her for the first time in years. And a sense of clarity settled within me. One glance behind didn't reveal a woman failing in her life. Instead, it showed a mother struggling against the waves, helpless to save herself. When Mark discovered I'd paid a visit to them, his return home was untimely, his expression a mask of seething rage. "Why were you at your father's?" he demanded. I replied that the kids had wanted to see them. "Don't lie to me," he retorted. "You went there to talk about me, didn't you?" Denying his accusations, I hesitated and found his hand swiftly meeting my face with an open palm. Stumbling backwards, I collided with the wall, the metallic tang of blood filling my mouth. In the distance, Lily's cries mingled with Ben's concern for my well-being. Mark glared in their direction, blaming me for their fear. Later that night, after the children had drifted off to sleep, I sat in the bathroom, gazing at my reflection in the mirror. My split lip and swelling cheek rendered my own visage unrecognizable, and a voice within whispered, "This isn't love. This isn't life." Recalling a phone number Susan had once scribbled on a receipt for a women's shelter hidden in an old cookbook, my trembling hand reached out. I was stunned as I pulled it out and dialed. The woman on the other end had a calm voice. "This is the Women's Help Center. Are you safe right now?" "No," I whispered. "My husband hurts me and the kids see it." "We can help," she said. "Do you have somewhere to go?" "No, just my dad's house, but he'll find us." "We'll help you stay hidden," she promised. "How many children?" "3, all under 7. Then we'll move quickly. Come in the morning." I hung up, cried silently on the bathroom floor. Not out of fear, but out of relief. I wasn't fast enough. Mark came home early from the gym. "Who are you talking to?" he asked from the hallway. "A friend," I said, too fast. "What friend?" "Tanya from college." "You haven't spoken to Tanya in 2 years." He snatched my phone, redialed the last number. A voice answered, calm and steady. "Women's Help Center. How can we?" He ended the call and looked at me like I was something he'd found crawling in his shoe. "So that's it," he hissed. "You're planning to run?" He moved swiftly toward the door, blocking the exit. "Mark, please," he implored, his eyes wide and his voice low. Fear and anger flickered across his face as he confronted the situation. "You think you'll take my kids? You think I'll just let you go?" His fist clenched in a threatening gesture until the sudden sound of the doorbell interrupted the tense moment. The chime rang out again, a long, piercing sound that shattered the silence like a beacon in the dark. Mark froze, his fist suspended in the air. "Who the hell is that?" he muttered, his eyes darting toward the clock that displayed 9:30 p.m. It was too late for deliveries and too early for emergencies. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice trembling uncontrollably. He grasped my arm tightly, pushing me towards the entrance. "Open it, and don't you dare say a word," he warned, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. My hands shook as I reached for the door, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Peering through the peephole, I initially thought it was a trick of my mind, but the voice that followed was soft and familiar, just as I remembered. "Julia, it's me. Please open the door. Ethan. There he stood, clad in a dark coat, looking older and more composed than before despite his sharp edges. His eyes remained gentle and sure. I heard Mark's voice hiss from behind me, questioning, "Who is it?" I replied calmly, "A friend from college." Mark leaned in closer, commanding me to open the door and smile. With trembling fingers, I turned the lock. The door creaked open, and Ethan entered the room, stepping into the light. Without a word, he observed my bruised face and swollen cheek, his expression conveying understanding. Softly, he addressed me. "Hey, Julia." My voice faltered as I responded, "Hi." Mark, standing by my side, challenged Ethan, demanding to know his identity. Ethan replied coolly, "An old friend." Mark asserted that as a married woman, I should ask Ethan to leave. In a show of defiance, Ethan met Mark's gaze with quiet strength, ready to stay unless told otherwise. Mark tried to intimidate Ethan, but he stood his ground, offering to leave if I requested it, asserting his presence. Unable to control the situation, Mark reluctantly stepped back as Ethan entered the room calmly but assuredly. Sufficient for me to take notice, Lily was in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. Ben's voice sounded behind her, full of fear and softness, as Emily tried to calm them both. "I need to go check on the children," I announced, heading towards their room. Before I could reach them, Mark grabbed my wrist. "They can wait," he insisted. "No, they can't." Ethan's voice cut through like steel. Mark turned to confront him. "What concern is this of yours?" Ethan didn't hesitate. Stepping closer to Mark, just one stride, he declared, "When it pertains to Julia and her children, it becomes my concern as well." Mark tried to stand his ground, but he sensed a shift. This wasn't the young man I had once studied with in libraries. This was a man who had dedicated years to learning how to safeguard and mend. "Leave!" Mark snarled. "Not without her," Ethan stated firmly. In a sudden burst of aggression, Mark swung his arm, but Ethan expertly intercepted, twisted, and pushed him against the wall with a controlled precision that hinted at training rather than anger. Cursing and struggling, Mark warned, "You will regret this." "I highly doubt that," Ethan replied calmly. Just a few days ago, Mrs. Thompson had interrupted before things escalated further. I helped her in the hallway. She returned a package that had mistakenly been delivered to her door. Her gaze lingered on the faint bruises on my arm. "Are you okay, Hen?" she asked softly. I forced a quick smile. "Just tired," I replied. She didn't push further. That night, I overheard her lingering outside our door longer than usual. Then, a voice startled us from behind. "I'd tread carefully if I were you, Mrs. Thompson," our downstairs neighbour warned, holding up a phone with a still-lit screen. "I've been recording every scream, every crash, every night. I called the shelter myself, and if this man hadn't shown up tonight, I would have intervened." Mark's face turned pale. Ethan released him and addressed me. "Gather your belongings. Grab the kids. We're not staying here another night." At first, I was frozen, trapped in the survival mode. Then, I saw my 3 children, wide-eyed and huddled in the doorway, and finally felt it. This wasn't fear, this was liberation. I knocked on the doors, and later that night, after the children had finally fallen asleep at the shelter, I questioned Ethan, "How did you know to come?" He paused, meeting my gaze. "Susan called me. She was concerned when you stopped responding," he explained. "She mentioned you might need someone by your side." I blinked in surprise. "You came all this way just because of that?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "No," he replied softly. "I came because I should have never let you go in the first place. And this time, I was prepared to welcome him back into my life." The journey to the shelter felt like an eternity, despite only taking 20 minutes. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tightly holding mine. He didn't say much, providing me with the comforting silence I craved, one that felt reassuring rather than lonesome. In the back seat, the children huddled together, Emily whispering to Ben, Lily nestled in her arms. Not a single tear was shed. They clung to each other like survivors weathering a storm. As we arrived at the shelter, a woman stood waiting at the door. She introduced herself, if as Maggie, Her smile was warm, but her eyes were sharper than they first appeared. She didn't pity me, she respected me. Inside, the space was quiet, clean, soft with blankets and soft-spoken volunteers. I filled out paperwork with trembling hands while Maggie brought juice boxes to the kids. "You're safe now," she said gently. "No one knows you're here, and no one will unless you tell them." That night, in a small room with bunk beds and dim lights, I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared out the window. Ethan knocked once, then peeked in. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think so." He hesitated, then asked, "Why didn't you call me all these years?" I looked at him, this man who had been my safe place once and somehow still was. "Because I didn't think I deserved help. Not after I chose wrong, not after I stayed so long." He stepped inside. "You didn't choose wrong. He fooled you. And staying, that wasn't weakness, that was survival." Tears welled in my eyes. "I let it happen. I let the kids see." He knelt in front of me. "And now they'll see this. They'll see their mum choosing better, choosing freedom." I broke then, but not like before, not into pieces. I broke open. The first few weeks were chaos wrapped in comfort, paperwork, legal calls, panic attacks at the sound of a closing door. The shelter's attorney helped me file for a protective order. Custody hearings would take months. Ethan stayed nearby, not hovering, just present. It wasn't instant freedom, it was exhaustion, flashbacks, and late-night doubts. But one morning, I realized I'd slept. Not just closed my eyes, but truly slept. And I woke up without fear. Lily started sleeping through the night. Ben made a friend. Emily asked Maggie if she could help serve snacks to the younger kids. I began to feel like a mother again, not just a shield, but a source of warmth. Mark tried to reach out once. He sent an email through a mutual contact, said he regretted how things ended, said he missed the kids. I didn't reply. I had sent my situation to the shelter's legal advisor. By the end of the month, I had initiated divorce proceedings, seeking full custody with no visitation unsupervised. During a visit from my father, he tearfully apologized for not noticing the signs sooner. Hand in hand, Susan reassured me, saying, "You didn't fail, Julia. You endured, and now you rise." One day, Ethan arrived with a small box, quickly clarifying, "It's not a ring, don't worry." I couldn't help but chuckle, my first laugh in weeks. Inside the box was a silver pendant, a small tree with roots delicately curled beneath the surface. "It's the tree of life," whispered Ethan, "for strength, for growth, for the life you're creating now." As tears welled in my eyes, I gratefully accepted the gift. "Thank you," I managed to say, touched by his thoughtfulness. Grinning, he mentioned a job opening at a private preschool near the hospital. They need someone who can connect with kids who have been through tough times, someone who understands. "Do you think I'm that person?" I asked softly. "I know you are," Ethan affirmed. Finally, after years, I began to believe it too. Subsequently, we moved into I found a rental house close to the school where the kids selected paint colours for their bedrooms, and we planted flowers in the yard. Our weekends were filled with making pancakes in our pajamas on Saturdays and returning to the library on Sundays. Ethan was content and never asked for much. Gradually, we discovered our way back. Not to who we used to be, but to who we had evolved into. We weren't broken individuals, but rather rebuilt together. One morning, as Emily handed me a drawing of our little family, it hit me that this was truly our home. Late at night, amidst the quiet house with the rain outside and the scent of lavender in the air, I finally sat down to write a letter. Ethan was peacefully asleep on the couch, and I could see the faint smile on his face over his glasses, just as he always had them. As I stared at the blank screen and began to type, the words slowly emerged. "To the man I once married." The phrase itself felt like a lifetime. "You once told me that I was lucky to have you stay," insinuating that no one else would want me. "You criticized me, saying I was too soft, messy, and ordinary to ever be enough. I believed your words for years, and I molded myself into the version you preferred, smaller, quieter, and compliant. I tiptoed around you so much that I forgot what it felt like to, say, stand on solid ground. However, what you failed to realize was that every insult and bruise, whether physical or emotional, did not showcase your power, but rather it highlighted your own fear. You were afraid of a woman who could still hope, nurture, and find joy even in your shadow. You didn't break me. You only manipulated me and distorted my self-perception, but you never erased who I truly am. The moment I walked away, I rediscovered myself. I remembered the girl who adored books and aspired to be a teacher. I recalled the mother who sang sweet lullabies, despite carrying a broken heart. And I regained the strength of the woman who once made a vow to her child in a hospital corridor. You tried to convince me of my worthlessness. Yet today, I have found my voice and my power key up to Lily's giggle, Ben's arms around my waist, Emily's drawing of a brave mommy on the fridge. Today, I walked into a classroom and met 5 children who've lived through storms. Children who looked at me and saw someone who gets it, someone who stayed, and today, a man who never raised his voice, who never asked me to shrink, brought me coffee just the way I like it and kissed my cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. You don't get to call that luck. You don't get to call this regret. You don't get to come back. I printed the letter, folded it, slid it into an envelope. Then I walked to the fireplace and watched the flame take it, slow, deliberate, final. I didn't need to send it because the power was never in the words. It was in writing them, in choosing to let go. Ethan stirred on the couch, blinked awake, and smiled at me with that quiet knowing he always had. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I just needed to finish something." He reached out his hand. I went outside after the rain had ceased. The moonlight flooded the floor with a gentle, silver glow. In that moment, a sense of freedom washed over me, easing the haunting feelings that had plagued me for so long.